Welcome to Soccer Player Wannabe YouTube channel. My name is Mariusz Konieczny, and I have a special guest with me today. This is the first time I'm doing an interview on this YouTube channel. I'm chatting with Michael Cunningham from 7MLC. Michael, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Mariusz. Thank you very much for having me.
So first thing, what does 7MLC stand for?
So MLC is my full name initials, so Michael Lewis Cunningham, and then 7 is kind of the number I had an affinity for growing up. I wore it for a lot of my youth teams, and even most recently at the professional level, wearing it for my club here in Rochester. So it's just a number that's always meant a lot to me, on and off the pitch. So I just combine the two, and it's just become kind of my personal brand now.
Okay, so you wear number 7 on your jersey?
Yeah, I do now. I had to go through a phase of wearing number 77 because number 7 is quite popular. So if it's not available, I kind of double up on the 7s. But any club that has 7 available and they ask me which number I want, is always what I go to without even thinking.
But you know, isn't it interesting? And correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're from England. I'm from Poland. When I played in Poland as a kid, there was no 77. Okay, there was only 1 through 11. There was the starting 11, and then a little bit, 12, 13, 14. But like the number on your back indicated the position that you played.
Absolutely, yeah. It was exactly the same for me growing up as well. And you wouldn't be attached to a number for a whole season. It was like you said, if you were playing a certain position one day, left back, you were wearing number 3, right back, wearing the 2. If you're in the midfield, you're wearing the 8. But I always wanted to be on that right side of midfield. I grew up watching players like David Beckham, had a big appreciation for George Best, and these guys were the number 7. So that's what I wanted to be. And it wasn't until I came to the US where there was a lot more flexibility in what your number could be, and you kind of attached to it for the entire season. And it really had nothing to do with playing position at all. I'd been on teams where the centre backs wearing number 10, the strikers wearing number 3. It seemed a bit more personal at that point. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot, but especially in my younger years, it was exactly like you were saying. It's all based on position, and you wanted to be a part of that starting 11. So if you were somewhere in 1 through 11, you knew you were a key part of the team.
And another thing, the difference between playing in the US, because I'm also in the US now, like it's the substitutions. When I played in Poland, there was only 2 substitutions. That's it. And if you got substituted, that means you didn't play very well. It wasn't to take a break. It was like you didn't play well and you got substituted.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. I came to play in university over here, and I didn't know that rule. And I remember my first match getting subbed off in the 40th minute. And I couldn't believe what was happening. I looked at my coach, and I wanted to throw my toys out my pram, but someone came over and said, "Great half, we're just going to keep you fresh for the second half." And I'm like, what are you talking about, second half? I'm done for the game now, right? But yeah, it turns out you can make a couple of substitutions, put the same guys back in and keep them fresh, which is strange to me, but is what it is.
Yeah, okay. So your background, you're from England, you came to the US. So talk me through it. Like, how did it happen?
Yeah, so obviously in the UK, football is a huge part of our culture. So on the playground at school, excuse me about that. On the playground at school, we're always just kicking a ball around, whether it's just for fun or playing for a club outside of it. We're usually always finding ways to play football down the park, in your garden. So I was always growing up with the football at my feet. I wouldn't say I took it seriously probably until my teenage years, maybe 11 or 12, where I started to actually play 11-a-side football. Took a little bit of adjusting at first because I wasn't that tactically astute. I'd always been technical and had some athletic qualities. I was pretty fast. I had some good height on me at a young age as well, long legs. But it took me a while to really kind of learn the tactics of the game. And so I think because I started a little bit later than a lot of other players in the UK, I think my passion was a slower burn. I think a lot of players who get to it at a really young age, if they're not developing or going anywhere with it, it's quite easy to fall out of love with it. But to me, it felt like almost a new activity. Even though I'd spent a lot of time with the football, the team sport aspect felt very new. So I was very keen to learn, absorbing as much as I could. And so I kind of reignited a passion for football almost like a second time. And then through the ages of 11 through 17, 18, I was always pursuing trying to play on higher level teams, you know, to challenge myself, try and get out my comfort zone. And then I got some opportunities in my later teens at the age of 17, 18. I went in with a team called Luton Town, which at the time, even though they're in the Premier League this coming season, they were 5 tiers lower at the time. So, but still, that was a good level for me to challenge myself. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. They had a few financial issues where they were kicked out of the professional leagues, out of League Two, and went into technically semi-professional level. And so that's when I needed to look into other options because of my background, I didn't have a good pedigree. I didn't have a good resume. So it wasn't like I had other teams knocking on my door ready to take me on. I was kind of out on my own with not much opportunity. So I looked into coming to the US just because not only can you play full time in university and get access to great facilities, coaches, trainers, athletic staff, you can also get an education at the same time. So it seemed like the right choice to pursue athletics as far as I could, but in the off chance it didn't work out, or if I got an injury, I'd have something to fall back on. So that's where I came out and studied psychology because I thought maybe I'll become a sports psychologist someday or something like that. Just so happened that I found opportunities to play after college. I had a good couple of years in university, so managed to get trials and things like this, and managed to play in some lower level professional leagues around the world. Australia, had a little stint out in the Philippines where I was training with the team for a while. Tried to go back to England in between it, but as you probably know, just the competitiveness of getting into teams there is so difficult that even though I had these other experiences, it didn't put me much further along in the UK. So then I came back to the US. I originally got into professional indoor football, which is, you know, five-a-side and a goalkeeper, and it's played in an arena with boards around the side. So a very different style of football, very physical, but a good way to kind of develop skills. It's tight spaces, forces you into quick decisions and sharpen up your footwork.
That's what Neymar did. I mean, it's futsal. It's a little different, but like Neymar or Ronaldinho, they had those experiences.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the reason I decided to give it a go, because I was a little hesitant at first, like wondering, oh, is this going to confuse my awareness in the outdoor game? Is it going to hinder my performances and change the way I play? But after reading a lot of articles on a lot of South American players on how they used futsal as such a valuable tool in their youth to develop that 1v1 dominance, that confidence on the ball in tight spaces, playing with quick touches, deceptive movements, I decided to give it a go. And I do think it actually really helped me in the outdoor game, because after a couple of seasons of playing professional indoor and then playing outdoor in the summer, I managed to find a couple of professional opportunities here in the US in the 11-side game as well, and managed to end up signing a contract in the USL Championship. Wasn't what I wouldn't rate it as a really successful season, but in terms of my journey, it was definitely a milestone that I wasn't sure I was ever going to reach. So I was very grateful for that opportunity, learning from some really experienced players, because the great thing about the USL, it's kind of that teetering point between low level and the MLS. So you get a lot of ex-MLS guys or guys who are pushing for the MLS in those squads. So you're always around very high level, intelligent players. And I was able to grow and learn. And yeah, I've had some really cool experiences that have all kind of been a part of my YouTube channel as well, getting to share those experiences. And what's great about my channel is I developed the channel before I'd even been pursuing full-time football. It was more of just a hobby and a passion. So it was quite nice how maybe a lot of my audience got to see some of the journey along the way, how I've used my personal training and some of the experiences to continue developing throughout the years and find ways to enjoy the game to its fullest.
It's interesting that you talk about the level in the US, because so I came to the US in 1996. I was 16 years old, and I'm sure people in Europe or England have the same opinion or negative opinion. Oh, you know, soccer in America is not that great, blah, 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 blah. Well, when I came, I was like, holy cow, these kids can play. And I was really surprised by the level here. So don't assume anything if you're from Europe that
No.
there's no good players here. There's a lot of talent in this country.
Yeah, and I think it's just growing so quickly as well. Even I've been here about a decade now, and I've noticed a huge advancement in the level technically and tactically. And I think now with the internet, YouTube, and things like this, we really have a window into the rest of the world, how they're training, and there's a lot more exposure for these players to develop themselves individually outside of team training, but also the coaches. They get to see how Barcelona's training, how tactically things go at Bayern Munich, and there's so many different ways to implement more advanced theologies of the game into the US. And I think combining that with the level of athleticism they already have here, in the US, they really have probably the best athletes in the world from just a pure physical standpoint. The athletic training has been top tier for decades. We see that in the Olympics, how they perform just pure using their body to run fast or strength. So when you combine that with a technical fluency of the game, as well as some tactical awareness as well, I think it's an exciting prospect that the US could develop eventually. It might take a while for it to become second nature, but we're already seeing huge strides here already, which is exciting.
Now, from your YouTube channel, I can tell that you really focus on the fundamental skills, building your foundation. Like, I mean, to me, this is obvious, but I don't see too many people understanding that building a foundation is important. Like, how did you learn that? Was there somebody in your family that taught this to you? Like, walk me through this.
Yeah, I mean, from a young age, I was always quite interested in individual sports. I played a bit of tennis. I also did some martial arts growing up as well. So I always had that kind of philosophy of individual training and whatever I do, because I knew for martial arts, you can't just show up once a week and expect to learn all the patterns or the movements. And with tennis as well, it's great if you have an opponent to play against, but sometimes if you need to polish off that forehand, you just need to get one of those machines that keeps firing the balls and you get those repetitions in. So I kind of applied that same theory to football, because I know you and I have spoke about this previously, but when you go to a team session, it's great that you're there for 2 hours, but in those 2 hours, how many actual actions are you getting with the ball? So if you're trying to improve your finishing, what if you only got one shot? What if you didn't even get one shot in that training session? Because you can't control the environment. You can't control whether you're receiving a ball or if you're getting, so you kind of have to find ways to replicate those scenarios so that when you do get the chances, you're more effective with it. So that's where I would go away and want to improve my shooting, improve my dribbling, because I wanted to make those few moments that you get in team training or team matches count. And I knew the only way to increase those chances is to develop that muscle memory so that it's almost automatic during a game. So I always wanted to train extra individually, and I knew it would really, I just felt the benefits of how much it improved my own personal game. So I wanted to show that on my YouTube channel as well, because I think a lot of players get to the pitch, they don't quite know what to do, or they might feel a little bit nervous. I've had a lot of messages from people say they don't feel comfortable when other people are walking past and they're kicking around with the ball. It makes them feel like a loner or something like that. But if you have a set of exercises that you can focus on, it kind of distracts you from those things, so you can really focus in. So I just try and show exercises that I've used through the years and ones that I've learned more recently, just to continue training and going through different actions that are going to help you in a match situation.
Right now, you're obviously a pro player. Do you have the time as a pro player, being part of a team, to still go out and train on your own?
It's tough. Finding that balance during season is not easy, and I think maybe I'm speaking more from a personal aspect, just because I obviously want to film some of my sessions as well, so it can take a little bit longer with the camera setup, trying to get different angles and that. But in terms of time, yes, you do absolutely always have time, and you'll see even at the highest levels, guys are staying behind and training to get those extra repetitions. They obviously have the luxury of having 24-hour access to an incredible facility. But if you're dedicated and you really want to improve, you do have to spend that extra time outside of your team sessions to hone in on some of those skills. And there's a lot of technical work you can do, and you can make sure it's low load, low impact on the body, so that you can still get certain repetitions, you know, kicking a ball against a wall, for example, even though it's going to still be a workout, you'll be sweating. In terms of the actual impact, it shouldn't have too much of a detriment on your performance when it comes to match day and other team sessions, because it's more of a focus, more of a technical aspect. And you should be doing that as often as possible to really develop that muscle memory. I think a lot of players are still concentrating on their first touch and team training and things like that, which can distract them from what's going on in terms of being in the right position or understanding if you've got a player on your back, because you're still focused so much on your technique. So the whole point of the technical training outside of it is to make it second nature, so that then you can focus on other things going on. You don't have to concentrate on your first touch anymore, even though you still are concentrating. That connection between the mind and the body is so quick now that you don't even realize you're focusing on it, because you can really process it quickly. The speed of the ball coming in, how much you have to cushion the ball to get it under control, if there's a space to take the ball into and whatnot. All of these actions will happen so much quicker, and you won't even really feel the difference if you're training day by day. But if you recorded yourself playing 2 years later after doing this kind of work, you're going to see a huge development in your game.
For the players that either want to, let's say, make it to the college level or even to the pro level, is there any benefit to them actually starting a YouTube channel? Like, would they get more exposure from it, or would it be something that's not good?
That's a great question, because I think it certainly has pros and cons. I think some of the pros are, especially for me, having an audience that is requesting videos and enjoying the content. Me being motivated to make that content is just another training session in the bank for me personally. So it keeps me accountable, keeps me working, knowing I've got these people watching. I obviously want to do it to a certain standard, so I have that motive. But I know you and I have spoke about this one previously as well. I've also been at clubs where it has been a little bit of a detriment, and almost it kind of causes a little bit of a ripple between the coach and the player. It can do. And obviously this is dependent on the coach's personality and what they believe in. But I've been to clubs where they support it. The coach gets it. They see it as a plus. They see it as me using my extra time outside of training to my benefit, because unfortunately, outside of a select few leagues in the world, the monetary gains from playing professional football is not huge. A lot of the times guys are below minimum wage or just scraping to get by. So some coaches understand that and realize I'm creating something for my life outside of strictly playing. But some coaches really want you to focus fully on the game, and they might see that as a distraction. So it's a bit more dependent on personality at that point. I think a lot of clubs, in terms of like the media staff, maybe the owners of the club, will always see it as a positive because they're going to be getting some exposure for the club. But the coaches themselves, who are picking the players and aren't really worried about that side of things for the club, the marketing and everything, it really kind of depends on what their perception is of it. If they see you doing it for a positive reason, they might encourage it, but they also might think it's a bit of a distraction. Maybe you're putting too much on the legs outside. Maybe you're doing it just for clout in their eyes, trying to be on a pro squad to help your brand. That's something a coach has said to me before. So it's kind of it's a very individualistic experience in terms of that, but it can go both ways. I personally see it as a positive. I think if you're sharing value with others, there's only very few players who really get to a stage where they're world renowned and can make a living off the game for the rest of their life, even when they've hung up their boots. So I think in the meantime, if you're grinding away trying to get to higher levels of the game, motivating other players is great for others, but it's also good for you. It kind of keeps you accountable, and you never know what it could lead to off the pitch as well. Might have some opportunities that support your journey of playing, because flying around to tryouts and things like this is not cheap. So if you can find any way off the pitch to supplement your income so that you can experience more opportunities, it might actually take your game further. Otherwise, you've got to have a full-time job or a part-time job where you have to be in the office at these hours, and that's time taken away from your training. And maybe you have to request time off to go to a tryout. It just complicates things a little bit more. So that's just a little opinion.
And what about when you play games? Do you have like fans recognizing, oh, I saw this guy on YouTube, or like other players? Do you have that?
Yeah, I do have it sometimes, and it can go both ways. I think I've had players who are just really grateful to meet you, nothing but positivity. But I think there has been times where I've come up against players or had people in the stands, and I think just because you have an audience, they expect something extraordinary, and it's ironic really, because just like you mentioned, my channel is about sharpening the basics, being good at the basics. It's not about becoming the next Neymar or what have you. It's really about building that strong foundation and repeating it often. But I think a lot of people associate, high numbers on a YouTube channel, that is, I'm going to be doing rainbow flicks and scoring bicycle kicks, or like beating 7 players and putting it top corner, where my game is actually fairly simple. And I think they're sometimes a little bit, I don't know if disappointed is the word, but sometimes they expect more. And I think that's just the perception we see of somebody who's popular. We expect something different from them. But I always try and tell people, I'm a very normal guy. It's not my fault that the audience grew to the size it did. And but I like to think it's because of just being a normal guy and someone that people can relate with. And my sessions are very attainable. It's something that everybody can do. I'm not doing something that, I'm not going out there and saying, this is how you score bicycle kicks and you have to do it every time. I'll put tutorials and things like that up. But in terms of the sessions I show and everything, I'm just trying to master those basics a little bit more every single day.
Well, I like when we talked, the other day, how you explained it's like building a house. You work on the basics. You want to build a foundation, so it's a strong foundation. And then I was thinking about it more, because soccer or football, it's played under pressure. That's the game, under pressure. And when you build a house on a strong foundation, it's like having it in a storm all the time, every time. So if you build your house on a sand, well, the storm is gonna, is not going to be kind to it. But if it's on a strong foundation, you have a chance. You have a chance to be able to execute the things that you think because every player is like, oh yeah, I got my first touch, I know how to pass. But do you really have it under pressure? That's the difference.
Exactly. Yeah, your body does funny things under pressure when it tenses up and it kind of acts out a little bit. So that's the perfect analogy, is that house, because I think especially younger players today, and you say it perfectly in your videos, I know you mention it a lot, that a lot of players can get in the routine of just watching highlight videos, and just seeing the very best bits. And it's kind of like designing a house, and they're saying, okay, what's the first thing you want to build? And you're talking about jacuzzis and balconies and all skylights and these things, and you haven't even built the foundation yet. The minute that first little bit of wind comes along, that whole thing is coming down. And that's the exact same way in your game. If your touch isn't proficient under pressure and you haven't rehearsed it thousands and thousands of times unopposed to the point where you can do it every time, and then implemented it into training sessions with players, that first pass that comes to you in a match, you're going to cough it up immediately. And you're going to be so stunned with yourself, and you won't be able to understand it, because you'll be like, I've done this a million times. But it's that pressure, it tenses your body up a little bit more. And you have different motives now at this moment. There's people watching, there's a coach that has kind of your fate in their hands, whether you play the next game, and maybe you're on a salary, and then there's a lot of things that come into play at that point. So you need to put yourselves in these situations the individual training is fantastic, and I believe you should do it every day. But multiple times a week, you should get yourself into a situation, even if it's just small-sided 3v3 or playing futsal or 1v1s, any of these kind of situations where it takes a bit of creativity and there's an element of unpredictability. That's always going to serve you when it comes to a match, because it is in the same way that your technique is rehearsed so many times, there's also scenarios in a match that kind of repeat themselves. So the more you can put yourself in a match situation, eventually you're going to get to a point where, again, we're talking about the speed of connection between the mind and the body. You're already going to quickly recognize the situation that you're in, that you've been in before, and you can calculate quickly what didn't work previously, what worked really well, and you'll find a way of finding success a lot more in your decision making and things like that.
Yeah. All right, Michael. Well, thank you very much. That was fantastic.
My pleasure.
Chat. Do you have any final thoughts for my audience that you would like to leave them with?
No, I just hope the message that you're portraying gets across, because I've really took a liking to it. I think you've demonstrated that it's the time you put in is the most important. Never think because somebody's a little further along at that moment that you can't catch up, because it's all about the time you put in. If they train once a week for 30 years and you're just starting, of course they're going to be more advanced than you, but you could train every single day for that hour and you can catch up that 30 years because they haven't been going every day, and you can get as good and further along. And we're really seeing that in your videos as well. I said on the chat we had before, it doesn't look like you had a 25-year break from playing football. It looks like you've been training your entire life. So I think that's a testament to the work you put in, and I hope others pick up on that and realize that if they're dedicated and put in the time, there's an endless amount of improvement they can make in their football ability. So keep it up.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.